What's up? It's Merc here. If you didn't already know, yesterday Blizzard Entertainment put out an article in regards to player feedback during the open beta for Diablo 4 in March. Now, if you haven't already gone over this article, I suggest giving it a read. It has a bunch of new updates and changes that are going to be coming live in the launch of Diablo 4. I'm going to link it down below, so if you want to look it over, you can look it over. I'm not going to go over everything, but I'm going to touch a couple subjects within this article. And one of the first things I want to talk about is the dungeon layouts. If you played during the open beta, dungeons felt very lackluster and there was a lot of backtracking. And it's one of the first things the developers talk about in this article is changing around the dungeons and changing around the backtracking and giving a boost whenever you're carrying an item. And they also go even further to make it so when you've cleared out the dungeon and you're backtracking to get an objective and you're going back to place it, that they're going to have small staggering numbers of monsters to seek you out, just to add that extra bit of combat and to make it feel more alive within the dungeon. They also reduced a bunch of cooldowns for objectives just to speed things up a bit. And one of the biggest grievances I had within dungeons with them feeling lackluster is there wasn't a lot of events. If you played Diablo 3, Diablo 2, there's constant events going on with the dungeon. They're almost always different each time you go in them. And one of the big changes they brought to Diablo 4 is the spawn rate of events within dungeons. They gave it a 50% increase from 10% to 60%. I mean, that's a massive increase. So now, like, almost every time you're going into a dungeon, something should be happening within that dungeon. Now, I played and got all classes to 25. There were a couple classes that within the beginning of the beta felt very lackluster. I know this isn't the end game, this isn't launch, so you can't really go off of just the beta on what class you want to pick. But from the beta, there was a lot of player feedback and they gave some buffs and some nerfs. Barbarian, Druid got some buffs. Rogue got a pretty good nerf. Imbuement skills were pretty powerful in the Rogue and they raised the cooldowns of this. Necromancer, they made Minion Mancer even worse. I mean, during the beta, Minion Mancer felt very powerful, but if you've been on Reddit or if you know anybody that's played the closed endgame beta, Summoner Necromancer did not do well endgame at all. Your minions died so fast, and it's almost impossible to keep your minions up during bosses, and it seems that summon minions will die even more often come full launch. I have a guide out on my channel of a Blight Necromancer, which I think is going to be insanely powerful come endgame. It's sacrificing all your minions, and even though the sacrifices within the Book of the Dead felt kind of lackluster, they did change that. Many bonuses in the Book of the Dead have had their stats increase. Now, I'm guessing this is to summoned minions and also your sacrificed minions. They did nerf Corpse Explosion a little bit. And one of the quality of life things they did with the Necromancer is they made your warriors and mages less bright. I know from a few people they said that the warriors and mages were extremely bright. It might depend on what kind of monitor you're looking at them or what your settings are at, but I know a majority of people were saying that your minions were very bright. A Druid was very lackluster in the beginning, and now instead of going over all this, they do talk about bosses having their mechanics changed around for melee. If you played melee on either of the weekends, you knew bosses in the beginning is very not melee friendly. You almost have to play some sort of range class to do well in the beginning. Melee was horrible unless you were like somewhat built for some range skills. Some of the UI things they changed, fixed an issue where the built-in screen reader was not reading key prompts, game options, and other UI text. They changed the font that they used in-game. Now, the font, I never really noticed. I didn't have any grievances with it, but I know a lot of people did. We don't know what with a new serif font. I don't know what new serif font is. I don't know if that's a specific type of font or what it is. I hope during the developer live stream, they're going to talk about the font and at least show what it's going to look like. They also, if the Butcher already wasn't insanely difficult, I don't know if you fought the Butcher. I was able to kill the Butcher once out of maybe the 4 or 5 times that I met him. And one of the first times I met him, I was like level 6 on a rogue, and it did not end well. And it seems that they buffed the Butcher, who obviously did not need a buff, in Worlds Tier 3 and 4. So, yeah, that's going to be fun. He's going to absolutely demolish you. So let's go over a couple other things. Sellers. I maybe did 1 or 2 sellers on Rogue. That was one of the first characters I played over the beta. And if you did sellers, there were pretty much no reason to do sellers. There wasn't anything worthwhile in sellers. And now they made sellers pretty good. There seemed to be like there'll be a good farm for legendaries, increase the chance for a dungeon event to occur in sellers. They will always reward a chest upon completion. So, I mean, if you've done a seller, it takes like 20 seconds to do a seller. So if they reward a chest near end game, you could pretty much farm sellers consistently to be able to farm legendaries and gear that you want. Now, one of the things I don't understand is the reset dungeon button has been disabled. I don't know why that's a thing. It's not removed, it's just disabled. One of the things I'm wondering is that with the 25% increase, if you're carrying the objective item, I think this could be a very meta way to farm dungeons. If you did the one Anima dungeon, you went in, you killed all the bosses and collected all the Anima, you went out, you reset the dungeon. If you have that 25% increase to speed, you're just going to fly through that dungeon, farm what you want, leave, reset the dungeon, and go back in. So that's pretty much the things that I was happy about within these updates, and it's amazing to see the developers actually paying attention and listening to the player feedback that we are giving them. And we still have 2 months out before launch of Diablo 4. So it wouldn't surprise me if there was more changes. I know these aren't all the things that players were giving feedback on. This is just a little bit of the stuff of feedback. So I'm suspecting during the developer live stream, April 20th, they're going to talk about these feedbacks and hopefully more potential feedbacks. Just the simple fact that they're already giving out updates 2 months ahead of launch, and we just had a beta not even 2-3 weeks ago, makes me very hopeful for Diablo 4. They're really showing care for Diablo 4, and they want it to be the best Diablo there is. They want it to be as fun as possible, and they want the audience to care about the game as much as they care about the game. So if you haven't read the article, again, I would go to the link I'm going to paste down below, and I would check it out and read it through. All right, that's it for today, and I'll catch you next time.